I spent years wanting to die, trying to die, and now I realize that is my power. That is my superpower. Let's get into it. This is our discussion for today. Hi, I'm Kelsey. Purple Sight is this space. Welcome if you've never met me before. I have a bunch of healing resources on my website if you want to check it out. I am a level 3 Reiki master, a tarot reader, and a spiritual healer. So go to purplesighthealing.com if you're resonating with this energy. But back to the story. So I want to take it back to the first time I kind of started my spiritual journey, even though it was like a years long process. Because my spiritual journey, my introduction to spirituality was not a peaceful like setting. It wasn't, it wasn't aesthetic, it wasn't peaceful, it wasn't any of that. I actually first was introduced to a lot of spiritual ideas and spiritual healing practices in a mental health program, in my partial hospitalization program, also known as PHP. If you know, you know. But PHP is basically where you go to therapy school, as I like to call it. I was in this like therapy group setting for a year of my life when I was 20 and 21. And it's basically like I went 8:30 to 3:30 every day to this therapy program, and it's meant to kind of ease you out of being in the hospital, but I ended up being in there for a year after everything that had happened in my life. And it was a lot of like worksheets, self-compassion, self-esteem, compassion, forgiveness, all of these things we learned, right? But every Tuesday and Thursday, we would have like a special activity every day. So we'd have like art therapy, sometimes music therapy, yoga. But every Tuesday and Thursday, a holistic therapist came to visit. And that was actually, we're going to touch more on this later, that was actually the first time I ever heard of Reiki. Serendipitous now that here we are. But anyway, this holistic coach would come and like she would do Reiki on us if we wanted. She would introduce us to chakras and crystals and also like, what's it called? Pressure therapy. I'm forgetting the word for it, but there's a word for it. Aromatherapy. She would use a lot of, scents and stuff. But yeah, a lot of that type of stuff. And I loved it. Like I connected with this woman, Regina, so much. And it was such a profound part of like the recovery process, the recovery room. And it was the first time I really opened up to the idea of spirituality and made me think that every idea I had of it before was completely off. Let me come back to my notes. So I say stay on track. But after I got out of PHP, and I was kind of in and out of IOP for a couple months after that, and I had really lost everything that was in my life before that. So it took me a long time to rebuild. And eventually I did rebuild. I went back to college. I graduated college. I got kind of a random job and just kind of stayed there for a while. And a lot of like the deep down issues I had that like led me to a lot of the hospitalizations and hospital trauma, that type of stuff, were really still there because I realized that when I was in PHP for the year after I experienced so much trauma, like it was really just to figure out how to be again after so many things in my life had been like torn apart and ruined. But I wasn't able to do any deep healing at that point because I was just literally in recovery and it was really brutal. So a lot of the reasons I was in the hospital did have to do with a depression and ideation, and attempts, but it wasn't the full story. But that kind of never really went away. Like, once you do go into a state of suicidality, it's really hard to release that from your brain. It becomes an ingrained habit, and then everything becomes a sense of life and death, and everything triggers that thought of, well, I could just, you know. But we're going to touch on life and death later, and that idea, and how that is actually coming out in the opposite way now, in a more powerful, positive way. But my depression continued because I rebuilt my life, and I rebuilt it in a way where I had experienced so much trauma. I was like, please just like let me do something, let me be good, let my parents not worry about me, let my family think I'm doing okay. I was just like, I need to convince everyone that I'm good now, that I got myself out of that shitty situation and I made something of it, even though everything I tried to do was not authentic at all and not aligned with my soul. And after a little while of doing that, my depression and my PTSD and my suicidality got triggered so intensely, and I actually had a suicide pact with myself that I was like, if I turn 27 and my life doesn't get better, if I still have this feeling of like suicidality coming up a lot, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna pull the trigger. And so I turned 27. What year was that? 2024, I guess. I turned 27, and nothing was better because my life was still the same. I still had this life that didn't feel like mine because I was just doing what I thought would make me acceptable to society, when society and a bunch of people contained in the society had so profoundly rejected me, which I'm probably going to talk about that in another video, just the psychological effects of being hospitalized for your mental health, because it goes a lot deeper than people think. But I'm trying to stay on track here because I get off topic a lot. I took notes for this discussion, which I never do, so we're trying to be more professional. So I had this suicide pact, and I had spent the entire year of my entire 27th year being probably more depressed than I have ever been, because it was depression in a different way. Like, when I was younger, all of the depression and like shit that was going down was very destructive and like in your face, and like I was also using a lot of substances, and like, yeah, it was just so, there was so much going on. But the depression I felt when I was 27 was so like, it felt like it cut more to my soul, because I was like, well, I'm older now and I'm wiser, and I'm still feeling this way. So I spent much of that year on the phone with my therapist, on the phone with the 988 hotline, sitting on the floor in the dark, panicking, crying. Self-injury has been a problem for me for many years, but it was very dark. And during that year where my depression got so visceral and deep, it almost like opened something up in me. It opened myself up to like seeing things differently, and I really had to go to that depth of depression to really understand this, because when it is so dark, it's almost like your vision becomes clearer. And like, to be metaphorical, like when you want to see the brightest stars, you go to the darkest place, right? And it was literally like, I can't explain it any better than that. Like, you experience such clarity and awareness and depth because you are in such a deep state of darkness and depression. And it really illuminates what your pure feelings are. It illuminates your authentic self. It illuminates your soul in a way that can't really be seen otherwise. Like, yes, there's no light in the darkness. There's also no light pollution. It's like the way your vision is just so clear and keen, you know, and you can really see the truth. You can really see the truth, right? And everything just becomes more real and pure. And so, where am I? This is like, obviously this is hard for me to talk about, so I did like try to prepare for this because I knew I was going to get overwhelmed by the topics. So thank you so much for bearing with me. If you're still here watching, I love you. Okay. Basically, when I turned 28, I got through this whole year of being so suicidal and constantly like, I'm almost positive that I didn't ever go a week without having to call the 988 hotline. And like, that was on top of like already speaking to my therapist mostly every day. So it was, and I was still working my corporate job at this time, and it was really difficult because no one knew that I ever needed to call the hotline. Like no one, like I would stay up all night, literally like sitting in the bathtub, thinking about dying, thinking about acting on it. And then I would wake up the next day and I'd just be at work, and it would be like, I just like would never unearth what actually has been happening to me every night. I would just, you know, talking about SI and these type of feelings, it's still very dangerous. It's still very stigmatized. And especially since I have a history of mental health hospitalization, I know like the situations that being open about that can get you into. So that's honestly, that's a major part of like why I truly want to live openly and authentically now, because I'm trying to reduce the stigma, because the stigma is still so fucking apparent and so present, and like it has been such a factor in my life, such a huge underlying factor, and it has impacted my authenticity, my self-concept, and the way I see the world and the way other people see me so deeply. And I'm still trying to like unlearn all of the things I learned when I was, you know, hospitalized, when I was so stigmatized for my mental health. So welcome, that's why we're here. I hope you can take something from this for your own journey. But anyway, I came to this reckoning, right? And I turned 28 and I was like, okay, well, my suicide pact is kind of null and void, right? I'm 28 now, and turning 28 was really, really hard, but it also kind of made things very clear where it was like, okay, well, I didn't kill myself, you know? So I can either keep going the way I am and constantly think about dying, or I can finally, once and for all, make a choice. Am I going to live? Because if I am, I'm going to live. I'm going to live, right? I'm choosing to live, then I'm actually choosing it. And that's why I believe that is my superpower, because a lot of people don't have to make that choice. But my life is such a deep, profound choice that I made, and it makes all of the facets of my life feel like life or death. Because if I'm choosing to live, then that means I am finally going to live for myself. It's like, because I did go that low and did go so deep into those depths of depression, like now I know I need to live fully, or I just can't live at all. I need to live fully. I need to live authentically. I need to live out my soul's truth, or I will not survive. And that's why I'm speaking of this as a superpower, because I think everyone wants to live authentically, but when you have been that low, it is not a want, it is a need. Authenticity isn't like this aesthetic, trendy thing, it's survival. For me, for potentially you, it is survival. And that is our superpower. When the stakes are life and death, that is your strength. That is your strength. That is a fire lit inside of you. And so here we are now. I'm on my spiritual journey. I had my spiritual awakening. I came into all of my spiritual healing practices. It's very serendipitous that after all of this, I somehow found my way back to Reiki, even though I hadn't really thought about Reiki for the years since I was in PHP years ago, like literally 8 years ago. And I found my way back here. And I think it gives me a really important point of view as a Reiki master, as a spiritual healer, because I was in that place and I didn't discover Reiki in like some spiritual space. I discovered it in a literal recovery room, in a mental health facility, right? And so it's not like it was introduced to me as this like spiritual woo-woo artsy thing. It was something that actually like mental health professionals found valuable. They found value in it, and they found it to be an important addition to the recovery healing process. And it honestly changed my life, and I am so grateful that I came back to it all these years later. It's like truly serendipity, and it's a beautiful part of my life. Because I found it when I was just trying to stay alive. And that's why I trust it, you know, because I have that experience. I trust it fully. And I think that's like, I really hope you are connecting with this if you're watching. I think you probably clicked on this for a reason, for serendipity, because synchronicity. I think you were meant to see this and meant to hear this. Because if you're someone who finds yourself in the dark a lot in your life, I think you need to reframe what you consider a strength and what you consider a weakness. Because all of the times you experience darkness, it sharpens your vision of who you are, what you want, and your power. And when your life experience is life or death, you have such a deeper capacity for awareness, for depth, for truth. I don't just want to live, I choose to live. Oh, we have one more thing on the docket, because I can't say this any better than the way I wrote it at the end of last year. So, I am going to read you my poem, Self-Portrait. You lived it. You lived it again. You thought you would never stop living it, reliving it. You dissect its causes, repeat its effects. Dissect its causes, repeat the phantom effects. You detect fire before the smoke, blot ink on frayed edges, burn letters for the borderlands, declare all null and void, bleed out the skull, fill it with noise. Temporary changes of residence for the inevitable return, the shadow sojourn. You see everything and nothing like parasites, transfixed by their tomb-dark transactions, muddying your multitude. What's murky is a vaulted door, conning your capacity for more. But what is more? Is there more? How can there be more than this? When you have only known pain, will you sew strands of the same? What does pain become when your hands grow tired of weaving its name? What transmutes the energy from fire into rain? Does it fossilize when you go to sleep, when you shut your eyes? Is it more alive in the dark? Are you more alive in the dark? If pain is the only alive thing in you, are you alive or indebted to a chain? Indentured to a body that would sell you before it learned your name? And what's your stake in the game? Your creator aims to wash you down the drain. Are you still standing, or do you drown in the shower? You set out to turn pain into power, to turn your stories into art, but the pain has turned into you, and you are one. You can be one with pain. You can live with that. You can live. You can run, but not away. You can run, but not away. You can run to the light while held in the dark. You can find light in the dark, like it's the first thing you see. You stop seeing, you only feel. You don't see them anymore, but they see you. You shut your eyes to them. Now you feel the warmth of the light, and darkness is yours. Darkness is yours. You make colors in your head, like your great-grandmother did, painting portraits after she went blind. You don't see them, you feel them. You don't see me, you feel me. And it's art. It's art. Waking for the art. Starting each day, painting in the dark. Thank you for watching.